Are you tired of the endless stream of fantasy marketing and vanity metrics? Yeah, so am I. My name is James Patrick, and I'm an internationally published photographer, media specialist, and marketing strategist. As a creative entrepreneur, I face the same exact frustrations you have, being bombarded by generic advice that promises success but never lives up to the hype. We need to move beyond the posturing, beyond the facade, beyond the image to navigate the unique challenges we face as creatives. Together, we're going to dive into real stories, real strategies, and the real work that can lead to the real results. This is the Beyond the Image podcast. What is going on? And thank you so much for tuning into our latest episode of the Beyond the Image podcast. I'm learning that you could take some time to get some information, get a little inspiration to help you in your creative entrepreneurial journey. You know, if you've listened to this show over the we launched in 2018, so it's been a few years, you'll realize it's rare I bring a guest back on the show. And that is a mistake. And it's a mistake I want to rectify. I went back and I was looking at our old episodes. In fact, I went back to our episode it was March 5th, 2019. That was a number of years ago. Episode 29. It was actually one of the first guests I had on this show because the first 20 or so episodes were completely myself. They were solo casts. I was just trying to get proof of concept of this show. And this individual, I first came across them because I heard them. It was either on another podcast or I actually think it was a webinar series. And my guess would be it was done through the American Society of Media Photographers. And I heard this individual talking about how creative professionals can navigate their career and try to procure work from bigger and better clients so that they could scale their career. And I basically put a pin on this individual and put a marker on them and started to watch them throughout their career until I could have the opportunity to connect with them myself and to show them my work and to be able to really start to pick their brain and understand what I could do to improve my own creative services. And that individual at the time, he was the director of photography at Sports Illustrated. He also was a senior photo editor for the New York Times. He was the associate director of photography for the White House. And currently he is the VP of photography for the WWE. And I thought, this is actually going to be our 600th episode of the Beyond the Image podcast. And I could not think of anyone better to bring back as a guest for this 600 episode. So want to welcome Brad Smith into the podcast. Brad, how's it going, buddy?
It's going great. I really appreciate beyond words the introduction. Thank you so much. Very flattering. Thanks.
So I came across something this morning. I thought it'd be fun to show it. We first connected. It was late 2018, early 2019. You're on the show in 2019. I know we met in person. I think it was also in 2019 when I went out to New York. I was campaigning some work around. I pulled an old photo of you from that time. This is what you look like back then, and you look about the same.
Other than I need a haircut, but yeah.
Well, here's what really pisses me off is this is what I look like back then. That's not even the same person anymore.
I'm going to say it's an elective process. You made a choice. I'm going to say what I'm going to say.
Well, no. My stress and my family made that choice for me. That was that's what happened to me. But your career, you've had so many very, very, very iconic positions throughout your career, and it's been on the directorial side, on the production side. I would love to know, like, what was it that drew you into that side of being able to curate an entire vision for a publication or for a company, and then pull together the creatives to help execute that?
Yeah, I started out first of all in photography in general. I loved photography from the beginning, and when at some point in your life, you're at that age where you're trying to figure out what do I want to do for a living. And, I had a lot of ideas in my head, none of which had anything to do with, there was Zoom management was a thought I had because I was going to go get a degree in that. There is a degree in that, by the way. and I was wanted to work for the Florida Fish and Game Commission, and like I had all these outdoorsy animal related things, and none of them really made any sense. They just seemed to be like a good local thing to do living in Florida. But then I realized how much I loved photography, like all types of photography, and how I was just constantly kind of drawn to it, and how my heart was just like, this is where it is. This is what I like doing. I never had any intention of just having a job, going home and forgetting about the job, and then going back to work the next day. I wanted to have something that was, to me, more fulfilling anyway. And I did come to this realization that I didn't want to be a photographer. I didn't. I studied it in college and so forth, and I did all that, and I understood that part of it. But part of it was just personality. I don't think I was really made up for the rejection process of showing your portfolio and getting turned down over and over. And I thought the thought of that was just like defeating in such a way that I can't even start it, right? I didn't understand it. I didn't like it. But I like the other part. I like the photography part, and I like looking at other people's work. And I literally have always described my career trajectory as like I wanted to be the person who picked photos that went into a calendar. That was my
Mm.
big goal, and it was pretty limited because it's only 12 months a year, so 12 photos and you're done with your job. So it's not much of anything, but I liked that part of it. And then once I got involved in that with the places I worked for Sigma, which is a French news agency with Eliane Lafont and Kathy Ryan. I worked with them, and I started learning more about the business of photography, which is something you need to kind of understand and not just take it as an art form. You have to understand the business part. And I would see how they were handling larger responsibilities. And I was always kind of drawn to that. So now it was just a matter of getting experience and finding the opportunity. And once I started working for magazines and getting more responsibility, like you have this section, even little things like the boss is going away. Here, you're in charge while I'm gone for one day. So if anybody needs anything, I gave them your number, and you're like, oh, and like that light goes off over your head, and like I really like this versus I don't like doing this. I just want to do the other part of the job, and it became more and more apparent that's what I liked doing. Was kind of overseeing departments, building departments, creating that visual narrative, working with somebody or a number of people, creative directors and so forth, on creating a look and a vision and so forth. And I got more and more comfortable with it. I wasn't always like perfect at it or even really good at it at first. A lot of it is the management part of people mixed in with the photography part, mixed in with the business part. So there's a lot of hats you have to wear.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of politics involved, obviously, besides just the photography part. And I kind of gravitated into this job where they they called me up, and I spoke to someone, and suddenly I'm like applying for a job that I didn't even know existed. And lucky for me, they had introduced, or I'm sorry, they had interviewed any number of people, and it just for whatever reason didn't work out. So then they went looking again, and then my name came up, and I spoke to them, and I decided, yeah, I'm going to pursue this, and I really put an effort into talking to them about what I thought the company could do. And it was a newly created position. I'm the first person to hold this position, and it has been nothing but a gift. And I took everything I had learned before, all the mistakes I had made before, and so forth. Not that I don't make them now, but they're certainly minimal over what they used to be. And now I have a department, and the key thing to remember, as a friend of mine at the New York Times used to say, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And I'm constantly looking at things in a big picture way. I rarely make any decisions that don't have additional layers down the road. Um, I'm going to make this connection because it's going to lead to this, which will lead to this. And I'm going to want to partner with these people for this reason because of this. And everything kind of has a big picture connotation. I don't really do as much day-to-day stuff. I do a lot of that too, but I don't do as much of that as much as I just try to keep it within like the global larger scale of the department within the creative services of the WWE, within the brand, the WWE in general. So I became interested in overseeing departments a few years ago. I became really good at it since I got this job. So I'll put it that way.
My first official work as a photographer, or in the photo industry, I'll say, was actually in your trajectory, where I was working as a photo editor, for, at first it was for a local newspaper, and then it was for a startup community magazine, and having that experience of, and setting aside the, the management of team members, and um the stress that can come with that, which certainly exists. um I had to really teach myself, before I was even shooting, what images worked and why they worked. And I had to teach myself that in real time. It's like, well, I want to run this image on the cover. Is this going to work, or is this not going to work? And I eventually ported that into my work as a photographer, where I now really have to shoot just thinking, where is this specific photo going, and what needs to exist in this photo for it to work in that intended use. One of the things I noticed about you, when you jumped on my radar, is, as you're amassing this experience and learning about the application of imagery, you really took it upon yourself, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anyone's forcing you to do this, but you took it on yourself to really educate and to really help equip photographers with information to help them navigate the industry in ways that they could not before. And I'm curious, what was it that inspired you to really take on that role as a teacher, as a mentor, as a leader, to help people navigate what is, historically has been a very kind of shrouded industry, and there has been a lot of confusion.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, I find myself enjoying, and I always have, even from the beginning, being a part of the photo community, right?
Mhm.
I emphasize that a lot, and to my team that's here, and to people I've worked with in the past, people I meet. And I'm a firm believer in the photo community in general, and being able to be a part of it. And you don't get to just be a part of it because you have a certain job and now you have free entry or something because you have a job with a title. You become a part of it by participating. You become a part of it by giving and learning and passing things along. And there are certain photographers in the world that, if you kind of watch how they work and so forth, they are very free and open about sharing the technical part of how they work. Usually it's the technical part, but
Mhm.
like they have no secrets. That, yeah, this is the lighting system I use. These are the exact 6 pieces I bought. This is how I set them up, and they tell you this for free, right? They just tell, because they like sharing the information. And I've always gravitated towards those photographers because I look at it as one big giant collaborative with all
Mhm.
of us together, right? And I always found that the opportunity to kind of listen to other people talk about their photography was one of my favorite things, right? And I remember, I think I learned that from being around athletes all the time. And I'll tell you why. When I was around big time athletes at the New York Times and Sports Illustrated, like professional world class athletes, right? The best in the world, Olympians, Super Bowl winners, et cetera. They certainly had a camaraderie with people that were within their sport. That's a certain level of like, hey, we've gone to war together, we know each other and stuff. And that part is understandable. But where their interest and where their creative part came into the conversation, and where their curiosity and kind of like their intellectual possibilities came into the conversation, was when they met somebody that did something other than what they did, right? If the basketball player met a surfer, then they're talking on a level, even if that basketball player doesn't surf, they're talking about. So you stand up and they're having this conversation. How do you jump so high? Says to the basketball player, and they have this conversation because it's a mutual athletic competitive spirit and connection that they have automatically. But they were learning from each other, and even if they don't process it later, it'll come up at some point in their life because they've learned from somebody else, and they're connecting, and they are interested and curious. And I saw this happen with athletes all the time when I would meet with them, and they'd have different athletes from different sports, how kind of in awe they were that somebody could play tennis like that while they played baseball, or that she was able to run so fast while he was a weightlifter or whatever. You know what I mean? You'd see this connection. And it was fascinating, and it made me think really full scale on photography, that it goes beyond what I'm doing today, whether it's sports or wrestling or news or whatever. There's this whole world out there, and to be able to kind of be a part of it, I can't get enough of it. I enjoy it greatly. I enjoy participating in it. I enjoy not knowing anything about it and learning from it. My wife is a fine art photographer, which has nothing to do with me whatsoever. And I'm fascinated by how she works and her process and the results. And I've learned so much from her, like in the last 10 years or something. And that's been a great kind of experience for me. And so that's where it came from. I've always wanted to be part of that photo community. I like it. I enjoy giving to it. I enjoy the opportunities in New York City to work for, whether it's true nonprofits or just reviewing portfolios or whatever. I've always enjoyed part of that. And it never occurred to me that it wasn't to some degree part of my responsibility as I went through this career. You know, I watched like friends of mine, like Jimmy Colton is a good friend of mine, and I watched him giving so much back to the business over the years on a lot of levels, things people don't even know about sometimes. And I found that varies, like a very mentor like and very admirable qualities, and I've enjoyed that, and it comes second nature at this point. I just think it's just the right thing to do, to give back and to share. And frankly, I can't understand why people don't want to, but I think it's just a normal thing to do. And I think it makes all of us better because we're all learning from each other, and we've all learned one thing new today, type of thing. And I think that just makes every part of the whole process better.
I think the idea or the concept of being self-made is a little bit of a mislabeling, and I think that just comes from ego. Like, I could say with truth behind it that I've not had any formal education as a photographer. I did not go to school for photography. I don't have a degree in photography. That being said, I worked with photographers. I interned for photographers. I assisted. I hired consultants. I read books. I watched videos. I had mentors. I had so many resources as a creative professional to learn from. And had these individuals not been there, or had these resources not existed, I could not have created what I did end up creating. So I would not label myself as self-made. I, was very fortunate to have resources available to me, which I think now there are more than ever before for aspiring creatives to learn. As you mentioned, the tech side, but also like people are starting to be a little more open and transparent about the business side and
Yeah.
how to navigate that part. Having the depth of experience you've had on the business side, what have you noticed being some pretty large changes in how creative professionals are trying to procure business or are trying to grow their business or work with clientele that maybe wasn't the case 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think that everybody in my position that's ever met people that have just finished or recently finished a photo course or a photo class or a photo education on whatever level, right? Let's say they went to Brooks or they went to, SVA or whatever, and they are taking photo classes, and even if they graduate or don't graduate, but that's kind of their formal education. I think the main notice from everyone is like they are technically usually pretty sound, but they have never taken a business class in their life. Nobody
Mhm.
taught them the business side of it. And I mean, they're only learning what people are teaching them. So to some degree, that falls on the institutions not to incorporate that into the process. But learning that it's a business is the single most that realization that it's a business and you should treat it as a business. That's the difference between I love photography and I sit on my couch all day, and I love photography and I'm working today, because you have to acknowledge that, and you have to embrace it, and you have to be as good at that as you are at taking pictures, right? People understand that. And by the professional part and being understanding the business, I don't just mean money. I don't just mean negotiating copyright and negotiating fees and all that stuff. That's certainly part of it. of course, but I mean that's not solely what it is. It's the responsibility that businesses have, right? And they attack things on a systematic, strategic level that sometimes people don't naturally do, right? They realize I have this much money to spend. I have a deadline. This is my deadline. These are the expectations of deliverables that I have. I need this kind of photo, 12 of these photos, 10 of these. Give me those. I'll create the product. And understanding that, it sounds kind of cold to some degree, but now it gives you a level of understanding of what you need to do to deliver. And I think that years ago, people primarily got out of the school and then, or maybe they assisted, like you said, and so forth. But anyway, they decide to enter the workforce as a photographer. And they were probably heading more towards just, I'm going to take photos and I'm going to be taken care of by whatever newspaper or magazine hires me. And they'll
Mhm.
take care of a lot of the things that, adults have to have taken care of. And I think the difference now is that people have a far larger understanding of their value as the entity that I'm hiring versus their photographs are the value of what I'm hiring, right? And I've said this before, if any photographer thinks that I'm hiring you based solely on the photographs you take, then you don't understand how the business works. I mean, that's just not reality. It may get you a job or some jobs, but it won't keep getting you jobs if you can't live up to the expectations of the photographs that you're presenting, right? Maybe your photographs are great, but if you're irresponsible on some level, that you show up late or you show up in an inappropriate fashion, you're wearing the wrong clothes or something, whatever it is, you just is socially, it just doesn't, it's not connecting. um, uh, you don't let editors know where your problems are so they can help you. All those things are part of the professional part of it, right? And
Mhm.
I think people now are certainly more aware that that comes with the package. um, and not to say that everybody's irresponsible years ago by any means. I just think they had a much more limited view of what they were expected to do. And I think they found those things out as they went along because there was nowhere to kind of research what those things might be that they don't know yet. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
They would just kind of show up and figure out, oh, it's a black tie affair. That means I'm also supposed to dress up nicely or whatever. Now you could kind of research, Google it yourself, or find out somebody in some connection socially and contact them. Hey, I'm going to this event. If it says black tie, do I need to wear a suit? I mean, these are just normal, everyday questions that a lot of people take for granted, but people need to know that kind of information. And I think that now it's easier to at least find it out. Whether they follow through on it might be a different story, right? But I think that at least the opportunity to know it is more uh, it's more available now than it was before. So the the chances of making a mistake should be reduced because again, your photographs are great. I love your pictures, but you parked where they told you not to park, and you were rude to the person getting you your credential. And now I'm never hiring you again because I don't care about your photos. You've misrepresented me when I went on the job. So these are the kind of things that I think that people have to be aware of. They have to kind of understand the value of that, and then they have to take it forward and actually execute those things, right? And I think that's the difference. And I have frequently mentioned that people work with photographers and people work with people that they want to work with. It's that simple, right?
Mhm.
You can get a one-off with somebody, but then you're like, that was great photos. I'll never work with them again. That was a pain, or whatever the circumstances are. But ultimately, they want both those things. A little selfishly, they want these great photos, but they also want to enjoy spending time with you and working with you, and to be a positive experience for you and for everyone else. And there shouldn't be any shame in that, and there shouldn't be any like, oh, that's a compromise or whatever. You just, should understand we want to work together. We like to collaborate. If those things aren't interesting or important or significant to you in your life, then that's really hard to make a living doing what you're doing if they aren't. Because if that's how you kind of view things, then you should probably study wolves by yourself in Alaska because that'll give you plenty of time to just sit there and talk about everybody else without actually engaging, right? I mean, this other part is part of the process, right? Everybody wants to walk away from and say, that was really awesome. What a great job. Everybody worked hard, showed up on time. We got in under the deadline. We produced some great work. We should be proud of this. And we're excited about the product. I mean, that's how you should feel after every one of your jobs. That's how I feel after our shows. If my photographers are working hard, which they always are, and they produce great work, which they pretty much do, there's nothing for me to really kind of nitpick and complain about, because those are the expectations I've set and this department has set and this company has set. And if you don't reach them, then you kind of find people that will.
Mm-hmm. The example that comes to mind is it's difficult to explain the nuances of working with professional athletes until you've worked with professional athletes. And I can think about this one particular professional sporting team that we'll just say they have a very aggressive posture against anyone who works in the media, and they're probably not the only ones, but out of the ones I've worked with, they seem to be the most intense, and they are just very critical and structured and have tremendous boundaries on what can and cannot happen when working with their athletes. And one of the big things being how much time you can get with an athlete. Now, if I have, and in this case it was 15 minutes, you have 15 minutes, and this is just drilled into me more times than I could count by the media relations department. I still have to make a certain number of images. I have to make imagery for the cover. I have to make imagery for the interior. I know how many pages I have to fill. And that means I have to be prepared to work quickly, to work efficiently, to be able to work and create what I would love to have 60 to 90 minutes to create, but legitimately I only have 15 minutes. And the professional athlete walks up on set. He's nervous. He really doesn't want to be there. He just got, railed online for having one of the worst media photos ever taken. He's not feeling good about himself. Doesn't matter. I still have to make these imagery. I still have to make him feel comfortable, him feel confident, him enjoy the process, and be able to execute, because I can't go back to my creative director and be like, well, this is why I did not get you what you asked for. This is why you now have blank pages in your magazine that you have to fill, because that's going to fall on me. I was the one sent out to be able to do this. And then until you've had that experience, it's really hard to communicate. Like, yeah, this is why someone who's worked with athletes is going to be entrusted to work with athletes moving forward.
Yeah.
What would be your experience, or what are things you've noticed in regards to how are some unique ways or some interesting ways that creatives have tried to market this or try to communicate this beyond just their portfolio of work? Because if it's not just a portfolio of work, it's all these other kind of intangibles that build trust for someone to get that opportunity. What have you noticed of things that have resonated with you?
Well, I'd say from the photographer's point of view, and you're right, you have to connect, and you have to connect almost immediately, because you're not spending 2 days with them, and whether it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes, it's never. I've never met any photographer that's like, oh yeah, that's plenty of time. I mean, like they'll get it done, and they'll say that because they have to remain positive and they need to produce a product. But when they go home and they really are open and talking about it with whoever, then it's like, yeah, I only had. They don't say, wow, I had 15 minutes and it was great. They say, I only had 15 minutes, because you want more, and that's a natural thing to think. I think that the connection with your subject is it drives the entire conversation. We'll just put it at that, right? I think that, and I think what we're kind of talking about are staged photos. We're not talking about shooting a game now. We're talking about some kind of posed photo, whether it's in a studio or outside or whatever, but it's a contrived situation. I have lights. I'm going to do this. Here, I've drawn it up. I've shown you, this is what I want you to do. What do you think? Blah, 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 right? So that thing that you're asking somebody to do, and athletes are no different than whoever lives down the street from you. That's hardly anyone's favorite thing to do, is to get their picture taken on that level, right? There's a few people like that, but they are few and far between, and they make a living at it probably. Most people, it's like, all right, it took 3 frames. Is that enough? Like, I mean, like it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So now I've always thought in photography, one of the greatest gifts and one of the hardest skill sets to learn and acquire and really honestly be good at is making subjects feel comfortable who are coming in for that studio type photo, right?
Yep.
Even if they know they have to be there and whatever, that's certainly a plus for you and it helps move the process along. But then you still have to connect, right? And I think that there is a level of trust with the photographers, the photographers I think who are the most kind of valued by the talent and then eventually by the team are those where they have a natural connection with the athletes, they have respect for the athletes, but not just as athletes but as people, right?
Hmm.
That's the key thing is just to have a connection with them and not be in awe. Not, don't ask for an autograph, don't ask for selfies, and don't ask for like, hey, can you call my kid and say happy birthday or whatever, because now like you've tipped the scales completely, right?
Hmm.
And now look who's in the driver's seat. Who's supposed to be in charge? Well, it's not the person asking somebody for 10 favors. You're not in charge anymore. And you have to kind of respectfully drive the conversation to where you need it to go. Even if they think they're helping you along the way, you have to drive it. And I think those photographers that could come in, create the least amount of or not create waves,
Yep.
and not create issues, and not have anybody really kind of talk on a negative level. It was great, but it took them 3 hours to clean up all the equipment they brought or something. They're not going to bring you back. I mean, you can make all the excuses you want, but they're not going to, right? You have to know who your client is. And I think that the photographers who make that connection with the athletes, just you don't even have to necessarily understand the sports perfectly. A lot of people do, a lot of people don't, and a lot of people still have that same connection even though they don't play the sport, right? They just want to be respected. They just want to be in a position where they're with somebody that they can trust, right? That you
Hmm.
won't run a photo that isn't flattering or whatever it is that creates that trust. And they're looking for that moment where they can get out of there, right? The minute they walk in, they're looking to leave. I mean,
Yep.
you should kind of look at it that way. What can I do to extend this date? We're on a date right now. And the minute he walked in, he's looking for like the check and he wants to leave, right? And you have to play it like, I'm trying to make this date last as long as I can. And I frequently have had those 15-minute sessions, but the talent is enjoying themselves and doing well. And unless they literally have another appointment, they can stay for another 10 minutes because
Hmm.
they can control what the media person says. Again, unless they have some important appointment or something. But if they want another 10 minutes, they can tell the media person, I want 10 more minutes,
Yep.
and they can have that. So you want to have them enjoy it. I also think, and maybe different photographers have different viewpoints on this, but I wouldn't go overboard with it where it becomes like every second you're looking at everything, but in a nice rhythm, share what the images are starting to look like, right?
Hmm.
Look at, do you like this? Oh my God, that's really cool. I hear that all the time from our talent. Oh, that's really cool. I love that, and now they're a little more into it because they like this picture you took, right? And once you kind of engage them, you can't have them look at every frame because that's not efficient and that's not productive, but you want to keep them up to date to some degree of what you're trying and you want them to be engaged. And if they are engaged, then they're going to stay longer and they're going to give you more. So the key thing has always been just be respectful of their time and who they are, and understanding that what they're doing is a business to them, even if it's fun and entertaining and all that stuff, it's still a business. And it just, if you can have that respect level with them, and you get that by just being somebody that is honest and earnest and not telling a bunch of stupid stories, not name dropping and whatever, just kind of like have a normal conversation with them and not trying to overextend how you treat with them as athletes, as big time athletes. And then I think you have a different kind of relationship that has legs, that has an opportunity to extend to another shoot, right? You could tell a
Hmm.
bunch of stories and it's a lot of fun that time, but it's like it doesn't really build anything. So what you want to do is build this relationship, because let's face it, what's the point in going on a date? to go on a second date. I mean, that's the
Hmm.
whole point of going on a date, is that you hope there's a connection and you get to go on a second date, right? I mean, that's the goal. So the photo shoot is the same thing. I want to build a relationship here. I want the team, I want the media person, I want the outlets that use the photos, I want the talent. I want them to feel like this is a safe place for them to come. They know what kind of product they're going to get, and they can look at the images and they trust that I'm going to deliver those images. And once they feel that, that's who they're going to call. I mean, inevitably, 9 times out of 10, that's who they're going to call. Right.
And it extends so much beyond just the client who originally hired you bringing you back. I can't tell you the number of times, we've shot a project for a magazine, and or whether it's a professional athlete or just someone, maybe it's an entrepreneur or a business owner or a celebrity, and they like the production so much and how the production was run that we get a call 6 months, a year down the road, and they're like, "Hey, we worked with you, that magazine. Are you open to work with us on something we're doing?" And that right there, I think, is indicative that you created a set environment that made all the people on set feel like they deserved to be on set, and I think that's such an important thing.
And I
Um,
think also, just to jump in real quick, I
mhm,
think that's part of building that photo community. And it extends beyond photo, but that community. I had one of those light bulb moments when I first started working and I applied for a job. And honestly, I can't even tell you now where it was, but I applied for a job. I didn't get the job. The woman was very nice and she was polite. I was just out of college, and we had a nice conversation, and it went well. But for whatever reason, they hired somebody else. But what that woman did was, she goes, you know what? A friend of mine who does the same thing over at blah 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 is looking for someone. Let me see if she still is. And while I was sitting there, she called that woman, and I went to visit that woman, and I got that job. So that's one of those things where first of all, it's very generous of both of them, and it's very fortunate for me that it happened. But the bigger point is that, like, it's not in a silo. I don't want you, okay, this conversation's over, I'm going to forget it ever happened and move on. It's like,
mhm.
you're not right, but you might be right for something else. Hey, I saw what you did with this other photo shoot. Do you want to do that for us? I mean, that's that transference that is, it's paramount to keep you working as a photographer. And by that, I mean freelance photographers, right? Staffers already have their job, so it's not so much that. But the freelancers, you need that transference as you are learning and working for someone, and they enjoy the experience, and somebody either is on set or that creative director tells somebody or something like that. You can't live without that word of mouth and without that cross reference as people expand, right? The woman called on my behalf to somebody else, and I got another job instead of her job. That worked out great. But I realized how important that is. That I tell photographers, anytime somebody asks you to look at their portfolio, go do it. Don't think of, well, I don't know if I really want to work for them or whatever. Like, first of all, that's nonsense. Second of all, that person, there's a good chance doesn't work there 5 years from now, right? They're
Mhm.
working somewhere else. And when they go somewhere else, guess what they do? They bring their photographers with them, right?
Yep.
They don't start all over. They bring the photographers they worked with. And every photo editor I know recommends photo editors and photographers and people in the business on a constant rotating basis. I'm always asking other photo editors, hey, do you have a good photographer in Indianapolis or something? Oh, yeah, I used to use this person. That happens all the time, behind the scenes and so forth. And that kind of connection and conversation, it happens all the time with or without you. So why not be one of the people that they're talking about, right? So sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to jump in and say that.
No, no, not at all. It's such an important point. Um, for most of my career, a lot of my work procurement has been, from my perspective, outbound marketing. I have to find the clients that I want to work with. And this is, word of mouth aside. I have to find the clients I want to work with. I have to approach them. I have to pitch myself to their brands or their companies. Um, this seems to start to be tilting a little bit to allow for inbound marketing, which is photographers being able to build a brand presence, leveraging, whether it's a podcast, social media. How important is that to you as kind of each year goes by, that you're now seeking out photographers versus photographers approaching you, trying to get work?
Yeah, so I think that in that area, and let's stay with the job I have now versus other jobs because they're not alike. So it's apples and oranges in that way. But um, where I am now requires a specific skill set to shoot ringside for our shows, right? That's a specific talent. You have to be trained. You're on a headset. You're listening to direction from TV people because it's a TV show. You know, I
Hmm.
mean, it's an athletically inclined sporting event. You know, the sports entertainment world and the pro wrestling world and so forth. And it's pretty fascinating all around. It's amazing what they do, but at the end of the day, it's a TV show, right? So I'm like photographing alongside with, in conjunction with, and working with TV people, right? I can't get in the way. I can't just suddenly stand in front of the TV camera. I've got limited places I can go because it's a TV show. So we cover that in that way. And I'm looking for people constantly that can kind of work within that realm, which is a fairly small group, right? That's able to do that. But what I found was that the occasion where I go out and search for photographers isn't necessarily to shoot my shows. It's more likely to be in our studio area,
Hmm.
which we have a studio. We have about 170 something live television shows every year. That's like almost one every other day, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty often. And we've got, three different brands. They each go every single week. There's no off season. I've got premium live events, which are, used to be called pay-per-views, and now they're premium live events, and they're specific shows that are like a culmination kind of show every month, and the brands have that. And so there's a lot of those shows where we are set up in an arena, and the majority of those I have a studio set up at every one of those arenas, right? And we bring the talent in frequently to come in because they have a new haircut, or they have new gear, or they have a new look, or they have a new tattoo or something. It could be anything, but we need to update the photos constantly. That's one type of photography. It's super important. It's the foundation for which we're built on. And we use those photos for everything. But on occasion, I have an opportunity to go out and seek new photographers that have never shot for us before, don't really know our brand so much. They've heard of it on a pop culture level, but they don't work here. And
Hmm.
they can bring something different because look, these are the type of portraits I take or something. And we can bring them in and do a special thing. And then those photographs might be used by the company. They might just be used socially by the wrestlers, by the talent and so forth. They might be using them. And we could figure out the usage later, but it's a fun thing to do, to find somebody that can take our talent and make them look as amazing as I think they are, right? They're like heroic, and they're superheroes, and they're entertainers, and they're actors, and they're athletic, and they're all these things all rolled into one. And you want a photograph that shows that, right? And it's a special kind of beautiful photograph that shows that for each of the talent, male and female, the whole roster. And I'll find a studio person once in a while that's a little bit different. They can do that. And I love bringing them in because it gives us an opportunity to use somebody new. So I do certainly have people reaching out to us like, hey, I'd like to shoot for your show. And I have to kind of figure out where they are and so forth. But I have so many platforms other than the show that I have a lot of photographers to look for on a lot of different levels. So I'm not just looking for people to shoot the show at ringside. I also need, as I mentioned, studio work. I also have community service where we go out and we go visit a boys and girls club, or we go visit a hospital and we see some kids, or we have some outreach programs where we help a city or community or whatever organize some events for people. So we do a lot of that when we come into towns. That's a different skill set than shooting our show. So there's a different type of photographer that does that. We have press events. We have marketing campaigns. So we have a lot of different types of photography that I need to cover. So it's not just the wrestling photography. So we're really broad on what we're looking for. And I do have obviously a core group that I work with, but I brought in literally doubled the size of the number of photographers that work here now than worked here 8 years ago, right? And that's really just to expand and create kind of a different opportunity and a look for people. And while I do, have people approach us, I'm more selective now, and I find myself going around looking through various avenues at new photography, which I find all over the place, and think, oh, I want to work with these people. Where do they live? That's my first question. And then what can they bring us, and can we work together, and would they be interested? And then we figure out a project to work together.
When you worked, particularly in print media, the deliverables are quite finite. I need X number of photos. That's what we're running. We might
Yeah.
use some additional on the web. Where you're at now, it really opens the script up for what deliverables can be created. And I'm curious, what have you seen evolve in regards to whether it's um, services that creatives are marketing, whether beyond just still photos, as well as like how are they shifting the actual deliverables that they're turning over to you on the production side?
Well, first of all, I've never worked anywhere, and I've worked at a lot of places because I'm old, and I've worked at a bunch of places, and I've never worked anywhere that used more photography across more platforms than this company does.
Hmm.
It's the foundation on which all of it at the moment is kind of built. Right now, that being said, it's rarely just straight up photography. We have incredible creative design team and art directors and creative directors and so forth, who take those photographs and then build on them for the various usages and platforms. Everything from merchandise to marketing to key art to email blasts to big giant banners that hang on the sides of a football stadium. I mean, we have all that stuff, right? And honestly, rarely is it just, oh, there's the photograph we took and there's nothing else on it. It's not rarely, and that never happens. There
Yeah.
has to be something on it. It have to be a name or whatever. But then they add other things to it because it's an entertainment business trying to get people to enjoy our show and come and join us and be a part of the process. So that whole part of it, I'm introducing one of the assets that's used, and it may be the beginning asset because it's the photography, but I'm introducing just one of the assets. Then all these other creative people put together a package, and the photo is just, again, just the foundation for it. So, that part is really kind of the fun part is to produce those images and so forth for that group. But then when you try to figure out, like, where are these photos going to live and so forth, what I found is that, and I kind of just have kind of embraced this philosophy the older I've gotten, is if you take a great photograph, I'll find a home for it. Just trust
Hmm.
me. That's my job. I'll find a home. I don't know where it is right now, but I'll find something for it. And it may be just inspiration to do something else, and then I'll hire you for something else. But I will definitely figure out a way to get a good photo used somewhere, whether it's in our program that we sell at the shows, or again, whether it's in a gallery on .com, or whether somebody puts it on a T-shirt or whatever. I will, or I give it to the social team, or I give it to the talent. We have talent that has more followers on Instagram than most people do.
Hmm.
So we give it to them, and that's also successful, right? There's no part of it that's not successful if somebody's using it anywhere. And all these different options exist. And we will find homes for those images if we can produce the images. And I'm always clear that this company uses so many and has so many opportunities. And we have a lot of talent, right? It's not like there's 10 people that work here as wrestlers. It's like dozens and dozens and dozens. I have 3 different TV shows. So that's a lot of people. And each one gets their picture taken, and each one uses that photo and wants that photo and needs that photo and then shares that photo. So all of those multiplied by that many, there's a lot of opportunity here for using the photography. And I think that one of the great things is, like, you just, if editorial is very, like you said, it's very finite, and sure, there's some room for adjustments here and there if you work with the right art director, but even that's going to be limited. It's not like a story's going from 1 page to 10 pages just because you took some nice photos. It's not going to happen because those other 9 pages are already called for by a different article, right? And they can only produce so many pages, etc. That's it. So there you're working with a finite board. Here, I think the difference is, and for our team is, it's incredibly flexible. We can try things that maybe it doesn't really end up working, which rarely happens, but let's say it doesn't. it's not the end of the world, right? And it's certainly not the end of the world at the New York Times if they assign something and the photos don't work. It's not like the paper collapses, you know. They lose a little money and the photo doesn't work. It's the same thing. But I have more of an opportunity here because I have a larger kind of license to work from here because it's not editorial, because it's more creative, right? So it's more flexible. So if we can produce the photos here, my team, I'll find a place for it to go.
You had talked about some of the non-negotiables that you have as someone who works with photographers, specifically when it comes to how they are able to manage a set and all the players on set. What are some of the other things that you look for, particularly in a photographer's marketing and their portfolio and their social media? What are you looking for? What jumps out to you as something that will give you pause and want to reflect more on their work or consider them for an opportunity?
I would say that I I don't really get caught up in their social media following so much. I'm not really even so aware of it. I mean, I know who's well known and who's not. I'm not stupid, but it's not. We don't really leverage that very often on our end. I think I'm more concerned with um, uh, something that makes you think, something that makes you have a reaction, something that makes you have a feeling, which I think is probably the same answer since the beginning of time that people have been working photographers. You want something that makes you stop and look at it, right? I mean, it's that hasn't changed in the decades. That part is the same. And I think that it's one of those questions, James, where you're saying to yourself that all the photography that's already been done has been done. There's nothing new. Wait until there isn't. Then, wow, look at this. This is new. And you kind of know it when you see it. And you look at how people just, they have a different eye than the three people standing next to them and so forth, right? And that's kind of who you want to work with. You want to work with somebody who just sees things a little differently, you know, and also it's visually appealing, and when you show it to a few people, everybody says just has that reaction. And I think that is, I think that's one of those truisms that hasn't really changed much over the years. So it's not like that's a big groundbreaking thing that I said, as much as it's it's a solid thing that hasn't moved like a rock. It's still there and it's always there. That if you can shoot something just slightly different than everybody else, then that's what people want to look at. Now, in my case, for this company, one of the things I really need people to understand is there is clearly a brand involved, right? And athletes doing athletic things, that certainly has value. People flying through the air or jumping or doing like heavy lifting with you know holding bodies over their head and all these things that are kind of interesting and amazing that they're able to do, the men and the women that work here as the talent. All that's great, but I need it within the process of what my brand is, right? It has more value when I can see the word SmackDown, which is our Friday night show, in the background. I need it when it has fans in the photo that are enjoying the process or part of the process, and I that photo now has more value. One of the things I noticed about a lot of sports photography is, having looked at a lot of it over the years, is a lot of photographers kind of encapsulate themselves into an area of the arena where they get closer to the athletes and try to remove themselves from the fans that are watching the game, right? They
Mhm.
just try to inch closer to the front row, and now everybody's behind me. And while that certainly is fairly traditional and has been happening for a long time, and certainly, you know, a great batting photo of somebody hitting a baseball is great, and it has its place. I look at it kind of just the opposite on this end. I want fans to be part of my photo. They're not in the way. I want them to be a part of it. My best photo is looking through 10 people, all of which have their arms raised, all of which are super excited to be there. And there's some great thing going on in the ring, you know, a great action moment in the ring, somebody is a victory or somebody's jumping through the air or whatever. And the fans are part of that story, right? They're not in the way, and they're not auxiliary players to the side. They are a part of the story. And I think that's the difference between this company and a lot of other places. Now, I've been to enough sports events to know that fans are uber involved and they're part of the process and part of the story, but I'm talking about making a conscious effort to document it that way, right? So that they become part of my images, which when you look at the images, you don't just look at it and say, wow, what a great play this guy made on third base. You look at the image and you say, wow, there's the wrestling show, and look at all these people having a great time, and look at this sign over here and fireworks over here. I want to go to that show. It looks like it was a blast. I mean, that's my goal, is to show a photo to somebody and they look at it and say, that looks like the best day ever. I want to go to one of those shows, right? And you don't get that just from people wrestling in the middle. You get that from that plus all the other things that go on. It starts with the wrestlers, but then all these other elements and layers build on it. And that's what I look for, is that people that can see whatever they're covering, that those layers to it are important, that it isn't just getting this isolated baseball card photo where nothing else is in the background, is just somebody making a great catch. I get that part. That's great hand-eye coordination, great moment. That's a sports moment. It's great, etc. But for my stuff, I need all those layers, and I need them to understand that when we do a show, it's an event, right? It's like a 2-hour or a 3-hour show, depending on the night, and it's an event. People have introductions, and it's very theatrical, and there's great music, and there's fireworks, and there's great costumes, and fans are going crazy, and people are holding up like merchandise, and they're wearing t-shirts, and kids are like having the blast, and there's on their dad's shoulder, and the mom's holding 2 kids or whatever it is. That's all part of it. And somebody who understands how to tell a story about everything that went on, and not just between the 2 wrestlers, that they can tell the story of that whole event, which includes all those things. That's who I want to work with.
I remember you giving lectures and interviews on, this was back in your SI days, and you had very similar sentiments, which was you wanted more than just the action on the field or the athlete, that you were so intentional about, you wanted the environment, you wanted the atmosphere, you wanted the energy that surrounded this amazing thing that was happening at that time. So I appreciate that. That's still something that is so much part of what you look for in creative. You talk to so many photographers, and a lot of the energy can be this fear, um, uh, concern about how the industry is changing or how the industry is evolving, and quote, things aren't like they used to be, as if that is a negative thing. But what's really inspiring is, whenever you and I talk, I get the exact antithesis, which is excitement and exuberance and enthusiasm. Is this just a Brad Smith level energy, or do you have just genuine positive outlooks on where this industry is going for creatives?
Yeah, I have. I've never for 1 second embraced the way things used to be process.
Mhm.
And I'm old enough that I've worked at a lot of those places that don't exist anymore, and industries that basically don't exist anymore. I still have a loop in our house, but it's used, I think, just to hold a book on the shelf until we don't really look through it. All those kind of things that come and go. I, I I just looked at it from the beginning, and each time I didn't see when I was younger that this is where it was going by any means. I mean, it never occurred to me when I was working for magazines back in the day and we sold advertising and we made a lot of money that things would ever change. I thought, well, I guess this is how it'll be forever. I didn't see it changing necessarily, but when it did, I just went with it and found a different way to process what I needed to do, which was to present great images for my client. I mean, that's what I do, and that's what anyone who works for somebody does. You are looking to somehow produce visually important and visually interesting and stimulating images for whoever your client is. That's what you're looking to do every day, right? And that's the way I look at it. And as things have changed, I've just said, "Oh, here's a new thing. Let's try this." I there's nothing I haven't I've come across that I've been afraid of, and other than just wanting to continue that thread of producing that kind of work. Now it may be a different way. And I will tell you that, like, my wife is a photographer. She's a fine art photographer, though, but is different than me, but still. And I heard her lecturing one time a couple of months ago, and she literally was telling people, one of the reasons my husband has done so well is because he's just embraced the change, and he's changed along with it, and he's grown and said, hey, let's try this. This is a new thing, right? I mean, I never really give it much thought, and I'm not conscious of it necessarily, but I heard her say that, and I said, yeah, that's not entirely incorrect, right? I've been able to adapt and change, and I think that that's, for me, obviously, it's why I'm still in the business and not doing something else for a living, for number one. And number two, I also think it's the healthiest way to go, because it should make you the happiest. Oh, here's something new. Let's try this. This is awesome, right? And
Mhm.
I've never understood the lamenting of sitting around wondering why you don't have just film anymore or whatever. And newspapers don't. Of course, nothing's the same. I mean, nothing's the same. My car's not the same. You know,
Mhm.
and my refrigerator's not the same. I mean, nothing I have is the same as when I had it, except the toothbrush seems to have not evolved much, but everything else seems to be moving quite along. And some of it's better, some of it's not. But the point is, it's new stuff, and you play with it, and you have fun with it, and you still produce images. And it never occurred to me not to look that way or think that way. And I found each one of these things to be like the best thing, because that's when it's happening, is when I embrace it and it's fun. And whether it's a photo technique, or whether it's the technology, or whether it's the platforms I'm finding photos for, I think it's all really pretty incredible, right? And I think that the opportunity to kind of embrace these as you go along, because one day you won't embrace anything anymore. So why not enjoy it while you're here, right? And I don't understand not wanting to do that. So um, uh, the photographers I work with tend to be forward thinking. And I look at this job that I have here now, right? I've been here for, X number of years, and really enjoys watching it evolve and growing. And like I said, we brought new photographers here when there hadn't been any in like 10, literally in 10 years, they hadn't used a new photographer for ringside, and they had a solid core. There's the people that were working here when I got here. They're excellent photographers. They worked really hard, and it's really not an easy thing to do. And they're super talented. We just expanded and added a few more to the list, but we didn't, it's, I wouldn't even use the word improvement. All we did was add numbers to an already great staff, right? So it's you got here, and you're with that, and you're watching things kind of change in the business. And this place is so good at kind of letting you kind of experiment and try stuff, and not feel like you're going to get let go if you try one thing that doesn't work or something like that. It's a creative um, company on every level, and being original and creative is rewarded and not put back. And I would tell you that's the difference between thinking about certain things for a magazine versus a company like this is, they only have one magazine to put out a week, or every 2 weeks, or every 4 weeks, however long you put it out. And then they only have X number of pages. So it's hard for them to really kind of like experiment and test and try stuff, because they kind of want to stay with that same thing that got them where they are, right? And I think that if you have a chance to work somewhere that allow you to kind of think of these things as a new growth pattern that's a positive for everybody. And also, I think it trickles down to my staff. I think that my team, sees that I enjoy what I do, that I love the photography part. I'm excited about it. And my favorite thing is to get a text from one of them at 10 o'clock at night. Look at this photo I saw. Maybe we could use this guy sometime or something. And that's like my best day ever. I love it when that happens, right? It's not just like business as usual when they go to bed. They're thinking, right? And they're like, hey,
Mhm.
maybe we could try this guy, or this woman took these photos. What do you think? Maybe we could try this. And that just goes to show you that they're thinking and open to opportunities. And I would hope that we continue to do that for a while longer.
I think, industry regardless, I think the most important characteristic any business owner can have for longevity is curiosity.
Yeah.
and like an avid curiosity, to be excitedly curious about, new evolvements in an industry, new technology within an industry, new trends within an industry, new processes or workflows. I think that's really what keeps us moving as efficiently as we have been.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
Can I
please.
just say that all those things you named, curious about, and you named like 6 things, right? And they're all great. And I will tell you, some of my favorite photographers, if they ask me why they're my favorite photographers, it's because they're curious, like you said. But it's
Hmm.
also about the subject matter, right? And it's not just I have to learn it because it's my job, but it's like there's genuinely enthusiastic about talking to this doctor because he does heart transplant. And then he did this and he created this valve and it saved the, like, they're so excited about photographing this guy because he's not because he's a doctor, but because they're curious about what he does and how he does it, right? And those photographers are always my favorite photographers because exactly what you said, they are curious, right? And
Hmm.
that leads, I'm telling you, it leads to better photographs because they're interested, they're engaged, the subject's now engaged. Oh, you're interested in what I do? This is a good day for me. Nobody usually cares what I do. And now they're talking in a different level, right? And genuine, sincere curiosity, not salesmanship curiosity, but like sincere curiosity is such it's an amazing, beautiful thing. And the people who aren't, I can't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand it, right? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So sorry.
But no, there's always product photography for them.
Yeah, there you go. See, that's why there's product photography. Exactly right.
One of my first uh photo gigs, I had to intern for an architectural photographer. I was an in-house photographer, got hired by this company, and they're like, before we can send you on assignment, we need you to travel with this guy and spend a week with him learning what he does so you can shoot on brand for our company. And could not have met someone less interested in people than this person. It's a good thing he photographed buildings, because
Yeah.
he,
See?
he did not have the disposition for connecting with other heartbeats.
I hear you. And listen, I've worked with plenty of people like that. And part of my job is to figure that dynamic out, right? All kidding aside, I know who's I can send to somebody's house because they've had some, I'm at the New York Times and there's some tragedy and you got to send somebody to somebody's house and they have to be sensitive to that. And somebody's representing you and understands how to deal with the family that just had a loss or whatever. There are people you send and there are people you're never going to send. I mean, that's a reality, right? I mean, you can't pretend that everybody's the same because they're not.
Yeah.
And part of my job and the jobs of like editors and people like that is to figure out which person will work best in this position. It's not even always the best photographer. It's which one will work best in these conditions right now, right? I think that's I mean that's super important to know and to remember that that is important, that you put the right person in a position to succeed, as every little league coach has said. Do you know who Lynn Johnson is, the photographer? You know who Lynn Johnson, right? She shoots for Geographic and a lot of places over the years. A fantastic, legendary photographer and wonderful person. And I once asked her about like a photo assignment she had. Now, this assignment was like a couple of days spending with somebody.
Hmm.
And I was talking to her and I said, like, so what do you do when you get there? Do you start like shooting right away? She goes, in an ideal assignment for her, I don't even pick up my camera the first day. I just observe. I just sit
Mm.
there and watch and that's when you have the luxury of multi-day things, right? That
Yeah.
which isn't always the case. But in this case, I believe it was Pat Summit, the former basketball coach at University of Tennessee, is who she was shooting. And the first day, she just kind of watched her have a meeting and watched her run practice and kind of learned and then figured out the rhythm and the nuance. And I don't think she ever felt a lot of photographers, I'm sure, are really nervous. Oh, I'm going to miss something if I don't have my camera with me every second of the day. Right. But she didn't feel that way. Just observing was important to her because that was going to help her with the photos she was going to take. Right. And I think that that's like an important lesson, that like sometimes you don't have to take a picture. You can just kind of sit there and watch for a minute and see what's going on, and then it'll come to you, right? You don't have to document everything every second of the day. You can just watch for a while because then it'll occur to you what's important. you'll see a tick or a nuance or some kind of gesture or something that they make, and okay, that's something I need to kind of pick up on. And it's important to remember that once in a while, it's okay not to take a photo. Just kind of
Mm.
observe and learn and be curious, like you said.
What I appreciate about that is the photographer having like unwavering confidence in
Yeah.
their approach.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah, it's okay to not take out my camera. It's okay to just be and observe and
Yeah.
study,
Right.
because I know that doing this will make my photos I take tomorrow that much better, because I'll be that
Yeah.
much more prepared, and that it requires confidence
And
in
and
your
and
abilities.
who's to say it didn't also make Pat Summitt feel more comfortable? Maybe like
Exactly.
now I see this person, I've seen her for a day. Now she can take photos to more, and now she's going to give you more over the next 3 days than she was originally because you're just there snapping photos and your face is behind the camera. Immediately, you don't really connect, right? Maybe that helped. That I don't know that it did or didn't, but the point is that it might, and any kind of connection that way to grow that relationship, however you get there, it's important, right? So yeah, I wouldn't worry so much. It's different with news and different with sports because
Mhm.
there's a game, and if you miss a play, you've missed the play. You can't go recreate it. But if you are doing feature type stuff, there's chances are there's everything you're looking at. If you miss something, you could pick it up tomorrow, or something similar will happen, or a better thing will happen. And so it's okay once in a while just to take a break.
Yeah, I like that. Brad, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this
Now we're
conversation.
going to take a break.
Yeah, yeah. If listeners want to stay up to date with everything you guys got going on, what's the best way to do that?
WWE.com. There you go. And we have a Monday Night Raw on Monday nights, and we have NXT on Tuesday nights, and we have SmackDown on Friday nights, and we're on TV like 3 out of 7 nights a week. You can't miss us. So it's pretty
Unrelenting.
pretty fun.
Never a shortage for
Never
sure.
shortage. I have to tell you, if you ever come to a live show, chances are we're going to be in a city near you at some point. If you get a chance to go to one show, you're going to be hooked. It's a pretty fun way to spend a night, I have to say. I didn't know what to expect when I got here. I mean, I had some idea. I mean, I followed it a little bit, but not like I do now. But I had no idea how much fun this place was. So I I will tell you something that is absolutely sincere. That every job I've ever had has been the best job I've ever had. When I worked for Sigma and Elion Lafont, that was like I was this French news agency. That was awesome. And then I worked for the National Audubon Society for Audubon magazine, and like it's all nature photos. That was great. And then I went to Sports Illustrated, and then I'm at the White House, and then at the New York Times, and for different reasons, each one of those was like, this is the best place ever. And it's just kind of my nature, I guess. I mean, I can't. It's not just I got lucky with good jobs. It's like just kind of how I look at stuff anyway. And now I'm here, and I can tell you this is the best place ever. So it's pretty good way to make a living. I really like it here. It's a fun place to be, I will say.
I think that's a outlook that we all should aspire
Yeah.
to, and I
I
absolutely
mean,
love that.
the alternative is really depressing. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, like I look at this all the time. It's like I get to create visuals for a living. Like
yeah,
I have no right to be upset day to day. Like, yeah, things can happen, but
right.
at the end of the day, this is what I do, and
Yeah.
I chose this.
A
So
100%. And listen, we didn't get into it for the money or whatever kind of things. You got into it because no one ever said I got in photography for the money, right? So you're in it for some other reason. And if that reason is still true, which it is for me, I still love looking at pictures every day. I never get tired of them. I still get photo magazines for no
what do
reason
you do?
whatsoever. So I mean, I'm still engaged in it and love it. And I married a photographer, so pretty much straight up, I don't really have anywhere to go except photography. So it's so far so good. I'm still still moving along, and it's going really well. And I couldn't be happier. And I can't thank you enough for even remembering we did the first one and invite me back for this one. And it's always a pleasure to connect with you. Really, it truly is.
Well, I promise I'm not going to let 550 or so episodes go by before we have you back on. We'll try to do this again without letting too much more hair disappear. Right?
Well, it's when you start showing up with baseball hats, then I'll know we got a problem. But So
Oh,
thank you
Brad,
very
thank
much.
you again so
Yeah,
much, man. Really appreciate it.
me too. I really did. Thank you.